Welcome, everybody, to another awesome episode of Cash Flow Positive. I'm your host, Kenny Bedwell, and we have a special guest, a friend of mine, also helps me in STR Insights Property Finder. And so before I drop his name, or it's Eric Porson. So if you don't know Eric, you're going to get to know him. Eric is super smart, very tech savvy. We're gonna have some tech talk on here as well. So if you're into that, you're gonna enjoy this episode. But that's not the point of the episode. The point of the episode is to hear Eric's story with buying short-term rentals, some that have worked out for him and other ones that haven't, why they didn't work out, and what he did to try to turn them around. And if you're in the similar situation, what you can do and the decisions you should make. So pay attention. And I want to be clear about this. Eric, this property we're going to talk about is in Blue Ridge, Georgia, which I'm just renowned for hating on. So Eric's over here laughing. But anyway, so without further ado, Eric, tell us more about yourself.
Thanks, Kenny. I got my start hosting on Airbnb back in 2009. I had a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, New York, and a roommate that moved out, and I couldn't afford to pay the rent and put up my extra bedroom. I think I had, 3 photos of my apartment in total, and had a lot of interesting people come through my doors that helped pay the rent, and that's where I got my start. And since then, I've moved on to bigger and better things than, a tiny 100 square foot bedroom in Brooklyn. I bought a house in Panama City Beach, Florida during the COVID wave of April 2021. It went very well that first year. I parlayed that into a second property in your favorite market of Blue Ridge, Georgia. Beautiful part of the country. I absolutely love it there. But that was top of the market when I purchased, and ended up not being as successful as my place in Florida. And I learned a lot from that, and continue to try to learn to help make that property as successful as it can be.
Sure. Eric, what else do you do?
I have, an interest in just sort of general technology. I got a start in the 1990s designing web pages back when most people didn't even know what the internet was. I got a job working at Mark Cuban's company, AudioNet, it was called at the time, broadcasting stuff online, and it's just always been a general interest of mine, and certainly that carries over into my hosting. I started a Facebook group called STR Tech Talk that just focuses on talking about new and exciting things and what's happening in the short-term rental space in terms of technology. Try to use it to my own advantage to help with my own hosting, whether that's just in the daily operations or, looking at data, or, it really runs the gamut, but that's kind of where my interests and passions lie.
So do you still do any sort of tech development or engineering on the side?
I dabble a little bit. Like, I've built my own websites for my properties. I've helped a few other people build out some websites. I'm, not as up to speed on, all the latest and, web development as I was 25 plus years ago. But certainly something that I do. I like to kind of tinker with my own reportings and metrics and data. I have things set up where I export all of my guest information, all my booking information out of OwnerRez into Airtable, and some slice and dice information that way to kind of give me some insights that I don't get otherwise from their sort of native reporting. And not a lot that I do with some of that. Like, I like to look at bookings by day of the week and see like when my guests are booking. What am I doing with that information? Not a lot right now, but maybe one day. I'd like to see someone, maybe getting off on a tangent a little bit, talking about AI in the space. And I think there's so much possibility, and it seems like most of the companies right now are just kind of focused on automated messaging and responses, but I think there's just so much more that can be done. I look forward to seeing where that goes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's interesting. Yeah, we could have a whole, I guess we can partly have that conversation too. I think one of the things we integrated, I don't know if you knew this, but we integrated AI into STR Insights last year. And so basically, like, for those of you listening who are like, okay, how do you STR Insights and AI? How do you use it? Basically, there was like a chat bot and it knew all of our data. And all you had to do was just type in questions and ask it questions like, hey, where should I invest? Here's my budget. Here's what I'm like, my goals, things like that, like ROI goals, and maybe some preferences too. And it would tell you the markets, and even it'd be able to tell you like certain areas within the markets. So
Yeah.
like zip code, like this is the best zip code to invest into this area. The problem that we saw from that tool is, as cool as that sounds, people couldn't wrap their heads around the usage of it. So, without me like sitting down with them, showing them and like breaking it down for them, like how to use it. And for me, it made me realize like maybe, maybe it's wrong time, like
Yeah, we've got a long way to go. There's definitely some practical uses, just for something as simple as Chat GPT. When looking for a property, I use it sometimes where if it's a property that's already a short-term rental that I find, and if you can find the listing, I like to use ChatGPT to analyze the reviews, right, and like see if there's negative things that are being talked about that maybe I can't control about the property. Like maybe it has a super steep driveway that you're not seeing in the pictures, or maybe they talk about the city dump that's next door that maybe you don't get by the pictures. And uh, there's so many practical uses. There's so many other things I use Chat GPT for, uh, alongside STR Insights. I love, taking some of the information out there and having it help me analyze things as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I
100%.
wish I had some of this information, 3 years ago when I bought my place in Blue Ridge.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll get to that. But no, I just think that for those listening, you're already in the space. There's a lot of really cool ways to integrate, AI into your processes in doing market research, and also the day to day. I think the next big step in our space, like you mentioned, Eric, is the communication. It's like, hey, what restaurant should I go to? And you don't have to program or say the message or automate it. It will like tell them, you know, based on that. And then I think something cool too that people don't realize is it can read your listing, and you feed it all the information. You can feed it all of your previous guest communication. You could feed it your listing description, your rules, everything. And then it will respond based on the language and the things that you've previously told people before.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think people understand that part, but that's really like it can almost like pick up your voice and your tonality and things like that too, and replying.
Yeah.
So
It's going to be exciting to see where it goes. And as a, frequent guest on Airbnb, I book a lot of places when I'm traveling, and I have in my head sometimes that everyone is a A+ super host and has great communication and gives me
mhm,
all the information I need. And I find that that's just not the case. So maybe at some point Airbnb will find a way to work this in for all of their hosts just to make for a better guest experience.
I agree. I agree. Cool. Okay. So love to talk more tech later, but what I wanted to bring you on is to hear more about this Blue Ridge story. So I've gained a reputation for being the Blue Ridge hater. Thank you, Ryan Bakey. Shout out to Ryan Bakey for calling like just Kenny he just trolling me. And anyways, that's a joke. But I have kind of picked on that market, and I picked on the market for a number of reasons. Just it's based on data. It's not based on hate. I actually grew up in Georgia. I'm very familiar with the market. I think it's a pretty area. I just never quite understood the hype from outside investors going into that market. And that's kind of where that like maybe hate or like prejudice stemmed from. But the data just wasn't really great, especially with right after COVID. And I started to see a dip in the number of visitors to the area. And so let's talk about, you bought a property there. You said you bought it in 2022?
March of 2022. Yeah. So it's just
Okay.
I've been live almost exactly 3 years, just over 3 years now.
Yeah. So everyone listening, March 2022, what's going on? So number one, the market the interest rates are going up, up, up. So was yours in the sixes?
Oh no, I got 4.375, which
Oh, wow.
it
Okay.
was,
That's
yeah,
really
it
good,
was, I
actually.
locked that in like early March. And, having refinanced my primary house to 2.5% and bought my house in Florida at 3%, I was like, wow, this seems really high. And man, what I wouldn't give to, be able to have that now. But yeah,
Yeah.
they're definitely on their way up. I called Parker with Movement Mortgage, who I had used before, and it was one of those things where it's like, get me all your stuff before midnight because things are going up tomorrow. And I was able to kind of lock that in. It probably would have been, closer to 5, just waiting another day or two.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And we actually just had Parker on the show a couple of weeks ago. So anyway, but yeah, so you locked it in. That's a great interest rate. Man, I actually bought a property a month after that, and my interest rate was in the sixes, the high
Yeah,
sixes.
it seems like they were
So
just going up
yeah,
every single day.
kind of a volatile time, especially for interest rates. But more importantly, housing prices were still really high, and I kind of think this was the height of it. You know what I mean? Like the people have to realize, like, just because like interest rates go up or down, housing prices, they don't just equally go up or down, right? It
Yeah,
kind of there's a lag. And we weren't we were like lagging where people were like, it's still the height of 2021, but like it's going to come down soon, but you're still, people are thinking, sellers are thinking, this is the height, I'm going to price this thing in the top of the market.
yeah.
So
Sadly, that's how I bought top of the market.
top of the market. So we're at top of the market. And then on top of that too, you're really positioned with bad data. I mean, I'm not going to like, I don't want to pick on, I'm not going to say any names or whatever, but I'll even throw out STR Insight. Like we are looking at the trailing 12 months, and unless you were trying to study trends before COVID, which frankly, it's not the same because demand has changed as well,
Right.
right? So
Dramatic.
demand is changing, supply is changing, prices, like everything's changing. It's a moving target. So it's almost just kind of throwing a dart blindfolded in terms of like, what can this property actually do? But you don't know that at the time either,
Right.
you know?
I mean,
And
yeah, I
yeah,
mean, not only could I not predict the future, but I just didn't have my own, knowledge and education in place to like really have the foresight to see what
right.
was coming, right? Like
Yeah.
when I remember being under contract on this house and starting to hear just some rumblings online, probably you included. I didn't know you at the time, but hearing people kind of have a negative, you know, vibe towards Blue Ridge, and it made me question a little bit, like, am I making the right decision? I felt like I was conservative in my numbers. Like I said, I really like the area. I like going there myself personally. And so I kind of maybe let my emotions get the better of me, right? And decide to move forward. And, if I could go back in time, I would just visit Blue Ridge and buy somewhere else.
Visit Blue Ridge. There's actually a really funny episode I did with Ashley. I don't know if you know Ashley in Gulf Shores. The week before, so people listening to this episode will have already heard the episode, but you got it when it comes out. I know you listen to the show. When it comes out, I was like, that's what you got to do in Blue Ridge. She did a unique cabin style in Gatlinburg that's doing well, but anyway, it's let's say it's a couples retreat, but to the extreme. So Okay, so you bought this place, like peak of the market, volatility, things like that. What's funny though, Eric, to honestly like not make you feel too bad. In September of 2021, I was actually heavily considering. I have a good friend who's an agent in Blue Ridge, Brandon Thompson, and he's a good friend. He was showing me some properties in Blue Ridge, and I was looking at properties in Blue Ridge in September 2021, and I felt prices were really high. I was like, I just feel like this is like high for a property with no views. It was a cabin, needed some work. I was just like, knowing Georgia prices and being local at one point in time, I just felt like it was like, I was just like, something's not right here. And then that's where I started doing more and more digging, and that's actually when I was getting STR Insights data going and learning about these markets and seeing trends and starting to pick that up. And so I decided that wasn't going to be the best play for me, thankfully. So, so unfortunately,
Only we'd have met sooner.
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it caught me with my spreadsheet sooner. So here we are. You bought this property in March of 2022. So let's start with what like did you run into any hurdles or pitfalls before you started making income on this property?
Yeah, and even just to rewind a little bit, you said not to make me feel bad. I don't feel bad at all, and I will be open and honest and talk about this because you know we see the same things now, right? Where like followed a bunch of people into a market, and I was part of a wave of people coming into a market that really couldn't sustain that. And, people are doing that now. You mentioned any market, and now you'll have however many people looking in that market. And like, I happy to share my experience so other people don't make the same mistake. So make me feel as bad as you want. And hopefully it at some.
No, no, no. I don't want to make you feel bad. I appreciate that. I appreciate you being open. I think that what you just said is really key. A lot of people listening to this are listening, they're wanting to buy or purchase in the future, and they don't want to make that mistake. And so if we can be as clear as possible in identifying the mistakes that maybe we've personally made, I think that's really helpful for other people. Besides the fact that, like, yeah, I bought here and it did well or it didn't do well, and just hearing only success stories all the time. So
Right.
I appreciate that, Eric. So, okay. Yeah,
So,
let's take.
step one is really understanding what excels and stands out in any given market. Right? You could go into Blue Ridge right now and buy a property, and I think make money hand over fist if you buy the right property. Right? There's people with larger, more modern looking cabins, people putting in pools. I know a few people that are, focusing on this type of property and they're, I think, doing really well. I haven't seen the
Mhm.
numbers, but, it is possible, but it's about understanding what that takes, right? I bought a 3 bedroom, 3 bath cabin. It is up on the mountain. It has a nice view, but that's really the only distinguishing factor, right? It was furnished when I purchased it. I added a few kind of personal touches to the decor. I named it after our late 3-legged dog Luna. It's called Luna's Mountain Lodge, and so I found some art that had like a black lab. I couldn't find a 3-legged one, but and so kind of went with that angle a little bit. But most of the decor, I have the big log beds, old, comforters that your grandma would purchase. And, I didn't really do a lot in that regard. I just kind of left it as is. And I didn't know any better, right? Like if I'd have taken the time and the financial investment to at least make it a little more, newer, modern, more luxurious. It doesn't take a lot to, add that. You can kind of stand out in that market with you could at that time, not so much now, but um, so yeah, I bought it. I did a few things. I got photos taken. I put in a fire pit, and I was off and running, and kind of just having the mentality that I had at the beach in Florida in 2021. Like, you use Price Labs, you set it up, you tweak a few settings, and you just sit there and, wait for the money to roll in. Well, that didn't happen, right? The money didn't roll in. And it took me a while to like really realize, like, hey, this really isn't doing very well. Luckily, I was, at least in a well enough personal financial position of like being able to cover part of the mortgage when it wasn't, cash flowing every month. But it took me a while to like really understand, like, okay, this just isn't working. What is wrong? What can I do to, make it better? Definitely had the thought of selling the property, but at that point, it's like that's a money losing endeavor as well. So I feel like if I was going to lose money, I'd rather lose money owning the property as opposed to just losing money selling the property. So I held on to it, and I really started to just educate myself and dig deeper into like, what can I do? What does it take to be successful? Part of that was, implementing some sort of revenue management strategy. I was lucky enough to be present when Emil Sakal had given a presentation to Bill Faith's mastermind group. This was a couple years ago before everyone was talking about revenue management. So that was kind of eye opening. That helped me tremendously. I hired a designer just to kind of focus on a couple of rooms. I didn't, want to spend a ton of money completely redoing the whole house, but just focusing on the master bedroom, my basement area. Like, what can I do to make this more appealing? And so all these things, at least it got to a point where um, bookings were coming in on a regular basis. I'm still not getting the nightly rates that I had kind of factored in my initial pro forma. I call it a pro forma. If you saw it, you would probably laugh at me now, um, but it's to a point where like it's better. There's a lot I probably could do, but at the end of the day, it's still a 3-bedroom, 3-bath cabin. There's, I don't know, 1,500 of them, and a 5-mile radius of me. I don't know how many exactly, and uh, a
Yeah,
lot. There's a lot.
there's a lot. Yeah.
There's a lot for sale if anyone wants to buy one. So yeah, I think it's a testament to, surrounding yourself with smart people that you can learn from, whether it's, on the uh, number crunching side or, the design side. I think of myself as a pretty creative person, talking about my background and web design stuff. But when it comes to interior design and a cabin in the mountains, I don't know anything about that, right? So it's like I'm willing to spend money to hopefully make more money and make that an investment in the property.
Yeah, that's no, I appreciate you sharing first off. So let's dive into some of the things you mentioned here. First off, what did you buy the property for?
$804,000.
$804,000. Awesome. Okay.
No,
And
not awesome.
yeah, yeah. Well, okay, you're right. $804,000. What was the first year's revenue?
Oh man.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I could run a report right quick, but let's say probably. I mean, if you want to use the exact 12 months from the day I put it in service, around early April, probably, I don't know, $40,000.
Oof. Okay, so you were definitely negative.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then when you made the changes, everything you said, so the design, the pricing, other things, what has that increased your revenue to now, roughly?
Uh, so I think last year, calendar year, was around 68,000.
68,000. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Oof. Yeah, 3-bedroom at 800. Yikes. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
I'm paying. I mean, granted, I escrow my taxes and insurance, but my mortgage payment with taxes and insurance, it's over $4,000 a month, right? So there's 48 grand down the drain just right there. So,
Yeah.
um, there's some other expenses I didn't quite anticipate. Man, propane is expensive. Don't have a gas log that runs on propane. It's like, yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. So,
So it's hard to make any money. Like breaking even, and I guess I'm happy with guests paying my mortgage. Maybe one day the dynamics of the market will change, or at some point I'll hopefully build up enough equity that if I decide I want to sell it, I'll sell it.
so I think there's a couple layers here that I want to break down for people, because I think a lot of people, I talk to some people who are like panicking about their properties not performing, and they're just like, I'm going to sell it. And I think when you sell, like kind of what you were mentioning earlier, I call it like locking in your losses, right? So I get it. Like, it's not making money and it's frustrating, and you're like, I want to try to get rid of this thing, but you're going to lose money. So let's break it down number wise, because I think this is really important. So let's say I'm going to make it a little bit general for math here, because we got people listening and driving, and I don't want anybody writing crap down trying to figure this out. So first year without the updates, it's doing 40K, and then you've improved it to, you said 68, so about 70, so about $30,000 increase, okay, in gross revenue. But if you sold the property, a year ago before you made the improvements, what do you think you could have sold the property for?
Uh, I never looked too seriously at it, but I, might have been lucky to get 750 for it, maybe.
Okay, 750. So,
Probably, I'd be surprised if I could get more for it even today. I don't know.
and what type of financing did you do on it,
I
by the way?
used 10% second home loan. So
So you virtually no equity in it.
right.
And if you sold it, you'd lose $50,000, plus you have to pay all the realtor commissions and stuff. So you're out, you know, $60,000 that you'd have to pay the bank,
Yeah.
you know. Um a- and then on top of that, let's say that your break even is a 30K. So like you're losing 30K a year paying the mortgage and carrying the cost. But if you were to sell it, that would fall off, but you'd have to pay $60,000 in losses. So you lock in your losses at 60K. But what you did instead, and I think this is really important, is you said, what can I do to improve the property? How much did you invest in improving the property?
Um, I mean, it's kind of been somewhat of an ongoing process. Uh, probably end up being about 15, 20,000. Probably,
15, 20. Okay.
I
Let's
paid a
15.
designer. I bought some new furniture, factor in my future new photos cost, which I haven't done yet. But yeah, probably.
Okay. We'll put it at 20. So $20,000. And now you're breaking even. Okay. So there's no more loss. You're breaking even. Okay. Today, the property is probably worth around that 750, maybe a little bit more, you know? But the reality is you have to hold it, right? And if you ever want to not, lose money, because you have the equity pay down over time, and then also appreciation, which will eventually go back up. So, but I want to make this abundantly clear with everyone. So right now, Eric is breaking even on this property. He invested 15K to basically negate a 30K loss, right? Because he was only making 40K before, and the improvements, now it's like I'm breaking even. Um, and only for 15K. And then he's not selling it and losing another 60K. So there's no loss right now. You know what I mean? Sure, it's not making money and it's not exciting, but he's found a way to, but there's still benefits, there's still write-offs from a tax standpoint, equity pay down, and also an appreciation down the road. We'll see that down the road for sure. But
Someday.
someday there's still a lot of benefits. And I think when people panic when their property's not performing, they're not thinking about all these other benefits of owning real estate and being able to leverage that. I know it's the biggest thing that I just did not include in all that is simply the headache of managing it,
Yeah.
right?
I
And
sometimes
that's
get a little frustrated, like I'm working for free. Like when a problem arises and it's like, I'm going through this for
right.
what?
And that's the opportunity cost. I think that you have to look at it and go, okay, if I'm no longer going to manage it, well, you can't afford to pay property management. That's like, let's get that off the table right now. But the only other option is then you have to sell it, but then you're going to take a $60,000 hit, or 50. Well, let's just stick with the 60,000 this example. So 50 or $60,000 hit. So then it's almost like, well, is it worth dealing with some of the problems? Is it's 50? If they're $50,000 problems,
Yeah,
it's like, you know what? I I'd probably suck it up.
yeah.
Like it,
Luckily, I never had any, knock on wood, major
nothing major,
issues,
right?
this typical stuff that people deal with. But
Right. Right. I think like so number one, there's I think you have to look at your property. So like if you're in a situation based on what you're saying, Eric, I think you have to look at the property, go, what can I improve? Is there anything I can improve with the property? Not like this was a dud, this is over, like I failed, whatever. Is there room for improvement on the property? Step number one. 9 times out of 10, there always is, right?
right,
It's usually with pricing or, market. Yeah, I've seen some working with some clients. We got a property from my other favorite market, Hocking Hills, Logan, Ohio. And they're like, we paid 950 for this property. It's only generating 120. What are we doing wrong? And I was looking at it and it's a cool property, but they just didn't add any flavor to it. That's the best way I could describe it. It was very like it was a cabin, but like all the colors, even like the design that they did, it was very like neutral colors. Like even the bedspreads were like tan or linen, and there was just no color to it. And then you have like like what I don't know what the cabin inlay wood feel on the interior.
yeah,
Like everything kind of blended together, and I was like, guys, like this is not this is not how you do it. Like I was like, I'm not a designer, but like I can tell you, like this is not eye catching at all. And so they were same situation. They're like, we're gonna sell it. We're just like, and they're gonna lose money on it trying to sell it. And it's just like, well, hey, let's take $5,000. Can you invest $5,000? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we can invest $5,000. If you take that $5,000, you will make $20,000 to $30,000 more on this example on this property if you just invest in your design decor. I was like, there's comps there to prove it. Like, it's not like it's like you can't do it. And so I think that we have to really take a step back, and have people look at our listings, critique it, get ideas like you did. I think selling and locking in the losses is sometimes, even in these competitive markets, kind of stupid. I don't know. What say you, Eric?
yeah. I mean, that's what I've convinced myself of, right? Like it's
Yeah.
better to hold it um, than to get rid of it. Um,
And
I think about too, you talk about making an investment, like what can you do to make it better? Not to rehash a topic that you already covered, but you had a guest on some time ago. I don't remember her name, unfortunately, but I know her cabin very well. She's the one that has the pet friendliest cabin and Blue Ridge.
oh, Elizabeth, yeah, yeah, it's
And,
really good.
I know that cabin because she's out there promoting it. I see her in the Facebook groups or whatever. And, there's other things that you can do to kind of combat, your sort of average
Yeah,
property that you can't create a view, you can't like create a certain, moat or whatever, but, focusing on some sort of niche,
yeah.
if you're desperate, you start to could try anything. And I
No,
think she's a
I
great example of that too. Like that cabin is, just as ordinary as thousands of others in the area, but the way that she markets and promotes it and, makes it pet friendly, people go there.
I agree. And I was probably a little harsh on what I was saying too. Like you're an idiot, you're stupid for doing no. Look, It's opportunity cost. And I just want to make that abundantly clear. Like, if you still have faith and you still want to try, I think if you have that like desire to figure it out, then figure it out. It is figure outable. That's not a word, but I'm making it a word. And but if you're like, look, this isn't for me, I hate hosting people. I'm not hospitable. Like, and it's okay. Like, to be frank, like I don't do a lot of guest communication. I have VAs that do it. I'm not I've been doing this for 7 years, and I have noticed a decrease in my hospitality. Like, I'm just like not as
Like,
hospitable.
yeah,
Like,
another
my
message.
hospitality level is like going down, and it's like patient. There's just so much going on in life. It's like I don't really care, but
Sure.
you can't say that. And so you either hire it out or figure it out. But if that's just not you, and you're really just not in this property, then yeah, probably selling it and getting rid of it is probably the best play for you. And you're not stupid to do that. That's actually beneficial. And if you could cut your losses
Yeah,
when you at that moment, I think that's really advantageous for those individuals. But if you like what you're doing and it's just a puzzle as to why this thing isn't performing the way it is, there's a way to improve it. There is a way. You just gotta figure it out. If you have that energy, then like do that instead of taking the losses, in my opinion. So
for sure.
anyway, all right, Eric. As we're kind of wrapping up here, what other like kind of final thoughts or anything else you want to add to this? I guess let me ask you this. Well, go ahead, and then I'll ask you another question after that.
Maybe the moral is don't give up, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't take a lot of effort to kind of learn and get ideas of what you need to do. You know, going back to previous topics we covered, I'm a big proponent of technology and using technology to help you in some of these things, but that's not even necessary or required. Like, if you're in a highly competitive market and if you're struggling, just, open an incognito tab in your web browser, type in your location, where you're at, some number of guests that kind of matches what your normal group size is, and just look at the properties that come up in the top results, right? Airbnb shows you what the top properties in your market are. You can see them on a map, you can see where they are, and you can see what the properties look like, and you can, you know, kind of mimic their success as best as possible. Now, obviously, there's things that you can't recreate. You can't change your location. You can't change, some physical attributes that, others may have an advantage over you with. But um, there's a lot that you can change, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to try to recognize what that is.
That's really good advice. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, Eric, I really appreciate number one. I appreciate you being on the show and sharing your story and sharing like what you did. It wasn't just like, hey, this failed and I was done. It's like back against the wall. How can I figure this out? And I think it's also important to point out to him, to be frank about it, it wasn't like you just all of a sudden started making a bunch more money. You just made enough to where it's like you're not losing money,
Yeah.
which is a win. And I want to be very clear about that with people. It's like we don't have to have all these like crazy success stories of people like, wow, I was losing a ton of money and now I'm making like thousands of dollars and I'm rich. Reality is that doesn't really happen often,
Right.
And so I appreciate you being on here and opening up about this and then figuring out a way. And I think that's the key is figuring it out, right? So anyway, thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate you being on here. I hope everyone enjoyed this. I think this was a really good episode in terms of like understanding, if you are losing money on a property, what can you do and how to better protect yourself, just a lesson from it.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
yeah, thanks, Eric. And thanks everybody for listening. I'll see you on the next episode of Cash Flow Positive.